Well, can you really start saving today for $1 million retirement for your kids? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon and welcome to the Prudent Money Radio Show. I'm your host, Bob Brooks. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, if you got a question for me, I've got an answer for you. Just go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com. There is a section at the top of the page, a link that says Ask Prudent Money. Just send in your question and we will get you taken care of. That easy. Just at the website, prudentmoney.com. Well, as we've talked about many times in the past, pop culture finance seems to be infatuated with $1 million. They write their articles as if the goal for retirement is $1 million. An abstract number, right, is what it is to me. $1 million. And now you see articles. Well, our experts estimate that you don't need $1 million to retire. You need more than $1 million to retire. That's what our latest surveys. Now, the thing about surveys is that they're random calls over like 1,000 people or something like that, and that's supposed to validate a claim that represents 300 something million people. So there's always that issue. But the bigger issue is that most people don't even know their numbers. Statistics prove that time and time again that they don't know their numbers. So, if the question's asked just right, the answer could be, it's $1.3 million. Well, probably one of the more ridiculous articles that I've seen about taking $1 million, and I wonder if at the end of the day, this is a article to just to get eyeballs on, and to create numbers. I mean, there's a lot of, obviously that's a big thing in the social media world, but this article is about saving money for your child so that they can be a millionaire. They can have $1 million at age 65. Now, if you're a parent and you read that article or you read that headline, you're probably gonna at least give it a chance and look at it and read a little bit of it and see what they're trying to say and what's behind the meaning of the claims, without question. So let's take a deep dive into some details of how they came up with this information. And the fact is, it doesn't even make sense. I'll explain as I go forward. So the whole idea is we are going to start as parents, the day our child is born, are going to start saving some amount of money and there's 3 different strategies that they estimate in this article, that they illustrate in this article. And that's going to set them up with $1 million at age 65. Sounds enticing. So when you're looking at any projections, reading any articles about just do this and do that, and you're going to make $1 million or $2 million or whatever the dollar amount might be, the first thing you want to know is, what is the average growth rate? And this is a number that is just abused, really abused, and really used in the wrong way. The rate of return of a mutual fund or a stock or whatever you're using is the average growth rate that this investment grows and they're looking at it as on an annual basis. Like, for instance, most high yield money market accounts over the past 2 or 3 years have averaged 4 to 5%. The bottom line is, the bigger the return that you estimate and use in these forecasts, the quicker you're going to get there, or the bigger the amount of money, or both, really. You're going to get there quicker, and you're going to make a whole lot more money, as opposed to taking a smaller number. And I've always felt like that. I mean, there's a couple of reasons for this. I'll get to them in a minute. But I've always felt like that pop culture finance just takes this random idea of a growth rate and makes it bigger than it should be. Because I think you should be really, really conservative. If you get that big growth rate, that's awesome. But it comes down to making sure that you get there conservatively as well. That to me is just important. And really, the answer probably is, for those who want to be more aggressive, is kind of somewhere in the middle of that. Unless you've got a trading strategy where you are willing to sell investments because of risk or various other reasons, I certainly wouldn't get just real aggressive. And I'll talk about that here in just a minute. But you got to be reasonable on the numbers that you use. Now, you can take a 65-year time period and use that as your sample size. You can take a 10-year, a 20-year, a 50-year, 100-year, whatever you want to take. It's just going, depending on what happened in those years, it's going to give you what the average return is. So just make sure you're using something realistic. For instance, I don't think the last 10 years have been realistic, but that's just my opinion. The second thing to keep in mind with this particular study is that the assumption, and keep in mind, assumptions are everything. I was going over a financial plan with a client yesterday and talking about the various assumptions that were being made and which ones were more valid than the others, and you've got to be able to take that and figure out what they mean to your financial plan, because they're there because change occurs. It would be nice for everything to be black and white, and you line up the numbers and you go forward and it all works, and then you know exactly when to do what steps to take when, but it doesn't work, unfortunately, that smoothly. Okay, so the assumption here is that and they're just like there's a growth rate assumption, there's the assumption here that is no one is going to touch this money. And I think you got to be realistic. There's a good chance that money will not make it 65 years. Because of one thing, I'll get to that in just a second. But there's a great chance that money's not going to. I mean, number one, it's the parents' money, and they may find that they have to dip into that for an emergency or whatever the situation might be. But unless you put it into a trust, where there's a ongoing bank type trustee, which is a little overkill, I think. But if you want to make sure it's only used for your baby boy or baby girl's soon to be 65 years from now retirement, you're probably going to need a trust so that it's guarded from you as a parent and guarded from them as a child. Number 3, and this is the big one, the very, very big one. In fact, what was interesting about this article, it's a very long article. It's very well laid out. It's just, there's just one assumption. Well, actually, this isn't an assumption. This is a fact that really does make the entire article invalid. This financial planner who was interviewed for this article, Mark Schindler, a financial planner with Pivot Point Advisors here in Bel Air, Texas, the great nation of Texas, as I like to say, said that while the strategies presented on the Money Guy show can technically make a child, hang on, I gotta get this, there we go, can make a child a millionaire by retirement. Okay, get this. The value of $1 million will not be the same decades from now due to inflation. It gets better. Assuming annual inflation of 2.5% in 65 years, that means that over the next 65 years, you're going to average a 2.5% inflation rate. 1 million would have the same value. Get this. Pop culture finance, listen to this. In fact, I know you know this. I hope you know this. 1 million would have the same value as roughly $200,000 today. So how appealing is it to say to your child, I want you to know we've been saving, they're 18 now, and you want them to know that you've been saving money so that they can be a millionaire by the time they're 65. And they've kind of got a grasp on, if you think about where 18 years from now, if you just had a baby and you've been following this strategy, they're pretty smart kids today as far as money goes. They're going to go, $1 million, it's not going to really do much for you. $200,000. Now, there's a lot of different assumptions, and I ran many of them. One was $1 million today at a steady 2% annual inflation rate. Mine was a little bit lower than his. The future value of that money in today's dollars would be approximately $276,050.69. And if you figure $1 million today, 2% annual inflation over 65 years, to get $1 million, you'd have to accumulate $3.6 million. So what does that revelation do to the article? We'll talk about it in just a sec. We are up against a break. This is Bob Brooks. Stick around, and I will be right back. Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. If you do have a question for Prudent Money, just go to the site, prudentmoney.com, and up at the top of the page it says Ask Prudent Money. Just click through and we'll get you squared away. That's off the website, www.prudentmoney.com. We're talking about the article that actually MarketWatch published it, which is a very impressive and a good news resource. It's talking all about all these ways that a parent can save money for a child and then 65 years later make them a millionaire. And the reality is that $1 million today is just not what $1 million is going to look like in 65. In fact, if you use a 2% inflation rate, it's about $276,000 is what you would be saving for, not $1 million. If you truly wanted to create a $1 million nest egg for your child that's in real time present value, you'd have to accumulate $3.6 million is what you would have to accumulate. So, assuming a 3% annual inflation, $1 million would be $6.83 million to have the same purchasing power. Now, you see, it invalidates the article without question. Number 4, do they really get anything out of this unless you take the financial education to the next level? It is the money that they cannot touch legally, but I would be willing to bet they're not looking at it and going, well, I don't want to touch this money because it's going to be worth a lot of money. Not that they're maybe not grateful for what it's worth at that point, but they probably don't see the whole point, except for $1 million saying what $1 million used to be. So, having said all that, number 5, I said C number 4, what looks like $1 million today turns into a small investment account in 65 years. Number 6, and this is something that I really want to stress, that as an investor, you've got to have this in the back of your mind. And that is that the market, unless history says this is not valid for the future, which I don't think it says that, bear market cycles come and they go. It goes from a bear market cycle to a bull market cycle back to a bear market cycle, and these last 10s and 15, 20 years. And what I mean by a bear market cycle, I mean a time that it just is not a good time to be invested in stocks. And you never can predict when they're going to happen. But just think of 2008, when the average investor based on the S&P 500 lost 55%. So let's say that your newborn baby is now 63, and they're thinking about that. We'll say 3.6 million to be the equivalent of a million. We'll say $3.6 million, and just knowing that they're going to get it in 2 years. All of a sudden, a bear market hits. The bear market creates a 50% loss for investors, and that almost $1 million in today's money goes down to 500,000. You see, the assumption that to me you got to be careful about is that nobody covers this, is that you could do all the right things but get wiped out by a bear market. And there's enough body of evidence, because there's been enough bear markets in the past, to suggest that it is a reality and it is something that could happen. It's not something that may or may not happen. If you look at history, history says it will happen. And that is one thing that nobody prepares for. And so even if, let's say that at age 65 or 61 or 61, 62, this individual your baby boy who's now that age, goes to a bear market. They manage to build it back up. Well, in the next 20 years, they're probably going to experience the same thing again, more than likely. So that just needs to be kind of kept in the back of your mind. And there's a lot we can say about that, but it's an assumption that's never really used. Number 7, and finally number 7, Pop Culture Finance uses this $1 million mark as the future retirement mark for most of their articles about retirement and retirement planning. It's a dangerous message that just doesn't have a lot of truth to it. Not that they're intentionally lying. It's just that Pop Culture Finance kind of leaves out some very, very important details about how all this works. So that's just some things to think about. If you were curious, the 3 strategies were, now think about this. Let's say that this really does work and the $1 million at age 65 is $1 million, which is what you're thinking. Most people are thinking as they're reading this. Strategy 1, invest $1,544 when a child is born and let it sit. You're thinking to yourself, I can do that. You mean I can turn $1,544 into $1 million at age 65? Sign me up. And it says in the article, read more about the assumptions used on the Money Guy show. The most important one they pointed out, but you know what? The interesting thing about it is, it wasn't pointed out until page 6 of 7. I think that the fact that $1 million is not what $1 million will be 65 years from now is a huge issue that should be brought up. Let's see. Okay, so that's easy, right? Or this is even easier. Strategy 2, invest $15.44 every month for 18 years. And that was really the two strategies that I wanted to point out. But as I said, this one financial planner says, assuming annual inflation of 2.5% in 65 years, 1 million would have the same value as $200,000 today. So that's what we do here, is try to bring it out in the open. But I will say this, is that I think it does illustrate, if you save over a long period of time, you can really save, put a lot of money back and let compounding interest work, and it does work. And you just gotta. That's one of the things that's just so important about getting kids, getting to where they do save money. And I wanted to go over this idea that I developed a while back. I don't know that we'll have enough time to do it, but yeah. In fact, you know what? I'm going to save it and bring up this story. There's a story about a friend of mine who owns his own company, and he got letters from the Texas Workforce Commission saying they needed more information about his unemployment claims. Apparently, someone had used his identity to put a claim in for unemployment benefits. They just lost his job. And the funniest thing about it was, he not only did put a claim on unemployment benefits, he did it against the company that he owns, that he works for, if that makes sense. And fortunately, the Workforce Commission saw a lot of red flags, and they contacted the guy, and the guy said, "It's not me," and they put it through their fraud prevention, and they said, well, we felt like there were a lot of red flags. As far as I can tell from his story, nothing was done. No legal ramifications, nothing. No problems, no nothing. That is a real problem if that is actual truth. Now, it may be that it's going to be tough to find him. It may be that the law enforcement industry is limited in the number of cases they can. This isn't that big of a case, and nothing happened. But I think it does speak to the seriousness of identity theft. And the fact is, with AI, it's going to get so much worse. And it's something that we really, as stewards of what God has given us, we talk about risk management all the time. You need a big risk management when it comes, a plan set up when it comes to protecting everything that you've got. And for someone to be able to almost pull that off, and the amount of detail that they had. In fact, he looked at his income, actual income numbers from the year before, and they were exactly the right ones. So that's pretty scary. So make sure that you are keeping an eye on your valuable information, and you are doing the right things to make sure. And we'll talk about this some more here next week if we get a chance. And make sure that you are doing the right things to protect yourself when it comes to identity theft. This is Bob Brooks. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.